Matthew McConaughey has incredible hair, but it wasn't always this way. Years ago, he was losing his hair, and he associates all of this regrowth with a product, a natural product. In this video, we're going to reveal that product, discuss the evidence supporting it, and evaluate the claims over Matthew McConaughey's incredible hair recovery. We'll give you the odds of going from this to this with this, and discuss other possibilities of what might be happening so that if you're fighting hair loss, you can make good evidence-based treatment decisions. And for those new here, my name is Rob English. I am a researcher who focuses on hair loss disorders. I'm on the editorial board of a dermatology journal. I publish papers related to hair loss. I referee manuscripts on hair loss disorders. And I make videos like this for people who are fighting hair loss, confused, and looking for a straightforward path based on the clinical data. Matthew McConaughey, I am a huge fan. In fact, I think that the first season of True Detective could be my favorite television series ever. And in general, I don't love talking about celebrities' hair loss situations because I consider that private information. But in this case, Matthew McConaughey has actually talked openly about his hair loss journey. He's talked about his hair loss on talk shows before, and he's attributed his very impressive hair gains to a very specific product. In this video, we'll show the clips of that interview, we'll dive into this product, we'll discuss the odds of this specific product producing these levels of regrowth, and we'll also talk about some alternative hypotheses as to what could be happening so that if you're looking for results like this, we'll show you a path by the end of this video that puts you in the best possible position for that. Because it could be a little bit different than what you're about to see in this clip. So let's check it out.
Oh my God, I was losing my hair in '99.
No.
What do you mean?
Yes, I was.
And
yes,
then
I
what
was.
happened?
I had a silver dollar right here.
Okay, the first thing to note here, by all accounts, is that Matthew McConaughey appears to be an otherwise very healthy person. And the photos of himself over the years suggest good hair density in his early 20s, followed by some slow onset temporal recession in the following years, alongside maybe a little diffuse hair loss across the top, with what Matthew McConaughey describes as a bald spot the size of a silver dollar at one point in his crown area. Now, this presentation of loss, its rapidity, this all aligns with a common kind of hair loss known as male pattern hair loss, or androgenic alopecia. This is a chronic and progressive hair loss disorder that's predominantly driven by interactions between our genetics and a male hormone, specifically dihydrotestosterone, or DHT. It's also super common. It's so common that you can't walk down a city block without spotting somebody with this condition. And currently, the best treatments available tend to target that hormone, DHT, and specifically DHT levels in the scalp itself. With this background in mind, let's see what Matthew McConaughey says he used for hair treatments, because clearly there's been an improvement here.
I started rubbing my head with this stuff called Regenix, and damn if I didn't bring it back.
Is that true?
That's true.
Okay, Regenix. Regenix is a brand that sells natural hair growth serums, shampoos, and conditioners. Their ingredients, according to the company, are customized to each individual based on their specific needs. And because of this, it's hard to actually know which ingredients are used in each person's formulation. We learned this the hard way when we reached out to the company trying to get clarity on this, and in the end, we ended up with a massive list of ingredients. I'll share that on screen. Now, on this channel, we've made so many videos on different ingredients, their evidence quality, how to select for ingredients that have higher levels of clinical support. And so the gist here is that these ingredients that Regenix includes in their formulations, they do have some support for hair loss. Some of them may even impact DHT levels, but the support is almost entirely built on things like petri dish studies or animal models or humans with hair loss that isn't hair loss from androgenic alopecia, like in the case of vitamin E, or humans with androgenic alopecia, but from really small studies, often with methodological concerns that bring the translatability of those clinical results into the real world completely into question. The polite way to describe all of these ingredients is that they're supported by lower qualities of evidence. And with interventions that are built on lower qualities of evidence, some people can and will still see an effect. But on average, the effect for regrowth is often much smaller compared to FDA-approved treatments like minoxidil and finasteride. And it's not just the level of evidence quality here, it's the actual comparative studies that demonstrate regrowth differences. There's one study on oral saw palmetto, a natural DHT reducer, versus oral finasteride, a pharmaceutical DHT reducer, and over a 2-year period, the finasteride group got a lot bigger hair gains relative to the saw palmetto group. We've discussed this in other videos like our video on natural supplements. You can check that out. Now with this in mind, let's talk about the amount of regrowth that is typically seen when somebody starts FDA-approved treatments like finasteride and minoxidil. If somebody starts both of these treatments, the average expectation is that they can typically see improvements to hair counts by around 10 to 20%. Hair density can improve by a bit more, and effectively they can rewind the clock on how their hair currently looks by 6 months up to 36 months. Some people do a little bit better, some people do a little bit worse, but these are really fair average expectations to set for these medications. For more information on why, check out our video on is it ever too late to reverse hair loss? We go into all of the science supporting these numbers and the rate limiting recovery factors, the fibrosis that sets in toward the mid to late stages of thinning, the detachment of the erector pili muscle, and a couple other factors that make regrowth beyond that a lot harder and a lot less reliable. Okay, with this in mind, Matthew McConaughey is saying that he used this natural product line with these ingredients to restore his hair. Now, as we'll soon see, this is actually entirely possible, but possible and probable are two wildly different things. Possible has to be proven once to be true. Probable has to be an expected outcome that reliably happens. So let's go through the possibilities of what I think might actually be happening here. Possibility number 1, Matthew McConaughey is being truthful and he's simply a hyper-responder to natural interventions. Now, even though people who use natural interventions tend to get far worse outcomes than pharmaceutical interventions, there are still some outlier responses that are incredibly impressive. We've showcased some of these on our site. I'll showcase a few here as well so you can get some ideas, but we see this with interventions like microneedling, scalp massages, even saw palmetto, PRP, and these things have way lower levels of clinical support, but in edge cases and in 1 out of 10,000 responders, we will see a response that rivals or even surpasses the average responses of finasteride. And that's why these average expectations are different from what you could possibly get if you are the best of the best responder. We try to illustrate that on these graphs, but keep in mind these lines, they're all individual data points. And all it takes is one data point scoring really well to make that probability turn to a possibility. And of course, with these crazy outlier responses, the internet tends to hyper-focus on these. So you see a lot of these on websites and on Reddit, and they don't typically represent the average response. So then we have to ask, is Matthew McConaughey perhaps a hyper-responder, a 1 in 10,000 edge case to natural interventions? Maybe. But is it the most likely possibility? No. I think the odds of this being the case are close to 1 in 1,000, 1 in 10,000, maybe even more. It's possible, it's not probable. Possibility number 2, Matthew McConaughey is being truthful, but he didn't realize he had other hair loss types alongside androgenic alopecia that actually are fully recoverable. We actually see this scenario probably more than the hyper-responders. Someone goes through a stressful event, they shed a ton of hair, they panic thinking that they're about to go bald, and then they get advertised a hair loss multivitamin with terrible clinical support. They start taking it. 6 months later, all their hair comes back, and they attribute all of that hair recovery to the multivitamin, when really, if their doctor had better educated them, they would have realized that they didn't have androgenic alopecia. They had a temporary form of hair loss called telogen effluvium. That's caused by 100 different things, including stress, but it also self-resolves with time, meaning that if you do nothing, you can still get all of your hair back. This happens far more than people would realize. So then the question is, did this happen with Matthew McConaughey? Does he attribute a massive hair recovery to Regenix, when in reality, it's because of something else? Well, on the one hand, Matthew McConaughey appears to have slow onset hair loss over a series of years, and in a typical pattern related to androgenic alopecia. We see the temple recession and the bald patch forming. So this chronic and progressive nature of his hair loss at face value, presented with pictures over time, this significantly decreases the likelihood that he simply had a telogen effluvium event from one-off stress, or that he was simply misdiagnosed entirely. On the other hand, there are tons of people that we've worked with who also had slow onset hair loss in a typical male patterned hair loss presentation, who tried best-in-class androgenic alopecia treatments, finasteride, minoxidil, even dutasteride. They failed to see improvements, and later through additional expert assessments and even scalp biopsies, they were actually diagnosed as having another kind of hair loss disorder entirely, or a hair loss disorder that was different from androgenic alopecia and presented alongside it, but was caused by completely different causes, thereby requiring completely different treatments, thus explaining the absence of their treatment response from FDA-approved options. We've made so many videos about this. Watch our interview with Alessandro, watch our interview with Carlo, watch our videos about Abraham, or the video that we have highlighting 5 other hair loss misdiagnoses that looked like androgenic alopecia that weren't. Or watch our near feature-length film about dermatologists screwing up hair loss diagnoses all the time and how they short sell their patients. Again, this happens a lot, much more than people would realize. In the case of Matthew McConaughey, he'd need to have a different hair loss type, one that matches this slow speed of progression that mimics androgenic alopecia, but that is also prone to full hair recoveries when it's treated, accidentally or otherwise. And one kind of hair loss that comes to mind that fits this description is alopecia areata incognita. Now, this kind of hair loss is super rare, and yet we've caught it in members of our community more than a dozen times. It can mask as androgenic alopecia. It can even present alongside it, but it's caused by immune system dysregulation, not from male androgens or DHT. Now, it's possible that one of these ingredients in this Regenix list here maybe addresses a rarer hair loss type like alopecia areata incognita. It's just completely unstudied for that purpose. And it's also possible that Matthew McConaughey used this product, saw crazy hair gains, and that he truly is not lying. He's being truthful. It's his lived experience. It's just that the products treated an undiagnosed, rarer hair loss type than the one that it looks like he had, thus explaining why others with androgenic alopecia trying the same Regenix products, they just don't get the same results. It's very much an outlier response. So it's possible, but is it probable? I would give the likelihood of this scenario maybe around 0.5%, maybe 0.25%. I might be being generous there. I don't know. And this leads us to possibility number 3. Matthew McConaughey is being partially truthful. He did use these products, but he also might have used other things for his hair that are perhaps better supported by the evidence. With this level of hair loss, even with the recoverability that we'd expect from finasteride and minoxidil, and even if he were a hyper-responder to those treatments, which again, that's totally possible, but the odds are still very low that he'd see this level of regrowth at his temples and at his crown. Those improvements, they are possible on best-in-class medications, but even with best-in-class medications, they're extremely rare. So if this is the case, where is all of that extra hair coming from? If I were to speculate, I would say that it's probably a hair transplant. This is, in my eyes, the 95% or bigger possibility, which would move it into the probability territory. Again, I want to make room for the fact that Matthew McConaughey's hair recovery, it's still entirely possible through what he's described publicly. It's also just highly unlikely. Now, Matthew McConaughey has adamantly denied getting a hair transplant.
I run into this guy in Beverly Hills and he goes, I have been wanting to meet you because I go to this conference every year. We always put you on the screen as a great hair transplant example, right? And he looks at it and he goes, you don't have hair transplants?
He attributes the gains to what he said in that clip that we showed. Is he telling the truth? Is he withholding maybe a part of his hair journey from the public, like a transplant or FDA-approved interventions? I don't know. I mean, I don't see any shame in getting a hair transplant. There's no shame in losing your hair either. In the case of androgenic alopecia, it's not even a sign of a problem with your health, your diet, or your lifestyle. As an example, just look at Kelly Slater. Kelly Slater, ultimate alpha male, world championship surfer, earths 10 hours a day, eats an incredible diet, dating some of the most beautiful women on the planet, bald at 28 years old. Sometimes androgenic alopecia just comes for you, and it comes fast. It depends on your genetics, it depends on your scalp environment, it depends on those levels of DHT arriving to the scalp skin itself. There's no shame in that. And there's also no shame in treating hair loss either. And recoveries like the ones that Matthew McConaughey have seen, they're totally possible through other mechanisms. It's just that, in my opinion, the hair transplant is the overwhelming likely answer to the level of regrowth that we see here, which is far beyond even what we would expect for a good responder, even a hyper responder to finasteride and minoxidil long term. Now, I found this video an interesting opportunity to go through different possibilities for regrowth versus probabilities. I love Matthew McConaughey's work. I hope that he keeps making films, making TV. Again, True Detective, first season. It doesn't get better than that on television. Lastly, if you are fighting hair loss and you're in the US looking for treatments that are hyper-personalized and based on the evidence, we co-founded the telehealth brand Ulo, that's ULO.co, to facilitate your access to these exact treatments. We offer a level of personalization that I feel is unrivaled by any other telehealth brand out there. Low-dose formulations of topical finasteride, topical dutasteride, full-strength formulations, minoxidil with enhancers such as tretinoin or retinoic acid, and a host of other interventions that are designed to put you in the best possible position for success. I hope that you check out the brand. Again, we're not the only shop out there. What matters to me is that you watch content like this and hopefully make better, more educated treatment decisions based off it. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.